The dynamic is this. We have a pretty heavy type 8 leadership team. And then we have a pretty large representation of type 6s among the various departments. And so this becomes really evident when we'll do our signature half day workshop. And typically in those workshops, we have time to break out by type or similar type where and again, this is something that we talk through during the workshop about not getting married to the results, but it's just, hey, at this point in time in the day, what type are you resonating the most with? And you go to those groups and you're allowed to leave if those aren't your people, but if you found those people, stay and kind of feel validated that you're not the only one. Turns out you're not crazy. So that's always a favorite activity, but we also really get a visual when we break out by the groups, and there does tend to be pretty large group of 6s. And then when we look at the leadership team, when we're doing a whole department, the leadership team tends to gather around the 8s. Not everybody, of course, but the majority of them based on what we see. As a reminder, our type 8s are striving to feel powerful, to have the power to produce a result. They have incredible energy. They move things forward. They are not going to back down from a challenge. They have the vision and they have the ability to move it forward, get it done. We talk all the time about if the type 8 had a brand, it would be Nike, just do it. Our type 6s are striving to feel secure. So assessing risks, maybe being a little bit more thoughtful, therefore a little bit more slower to act is common, instead of kind of figuring out along the way, or, hey, we're probably going to run into some problems. We'll figure it out when we get there, which tends to be the thought process of the 8. They're just, let's move forward. The 6 tends to want to have a plan. Hey, if things are going to go wrong, let's first understand what might go wrong. And can we come up with some contingency plans? Can we make sure that this is the right direction before we just start steamrolling there and then have to back up or redo things? And so just in that very brief description, you can already kind of see where these two types might have some friction in the workplace among teammates and then also among the leadership and the team that's being led. And because this is a common dynamic, one of the most common pieces of feedback that we get in our pre-workshop questionnaires, probably I would say top 3 comment, just varies where it lands, is something about, I wish we had more information. I wish we knew what was going on. I wish there was more role clarity. I wish there was more communication from the leadership about what is going on or why they need what they're telling us they need, just some additional context. And we'll have all kinds of versions of that feedback come in. And so it takes up a big piece of the pie chart. And this isn't just one group. This is multiple groups. That's very common. And so when you think about the type that tends to show up the most on the team, the type of feedback, what they're saying that they need from the leadership team, what they're saying that they appreciate from the leadership team, what they say that might be missing, it makes sense that it is what it is. And then it also makes sense why there may be a gap in those types of things, because you have the leadership team who isn't necessarily thinking about explaining things, slowing down to provide some additional context, checking in, everybody okay? It's just full steam ahead. Hey, we have things to do. We need to get things done. And so it's like, okay, this feedback that the team is getting makes sense. They're definitely not alone. And it's to think about, okay, we're getting this type of feedback. And then when we look at our team map and see what types are represented the most, or what people are saying they resonate the most with, well, this type of feedback absolutely makes sense that this is something that we would get. And so it's interesting, even when we start doing map analysis, I guess, that you can even start to think, okay, well, of course of course the team would be saying these sort of things. Of course, when we are being led by this striving to feel safe, secure, risk assessment, minimizing risk, avoiding risk, planning, wanting more details and information, right? So right away, nobody's doing anything wrong. No team is, messed up. No team is worse than the other. It's just this dynamic comes up so often, and so it makes sense that feedback comes up so often. And what I will hear from the different groups is that the sixes will say, and sometimes we'll have groups like the twos chime in where they'll say, you're telling us eights, maybe even threes, just kind of this energy of let's get it done. You're telling us to come to you and just be brutally honest and just give it to you straight. But when we do, it feels like sometimes we get attacked. Sometimes it feels like now we're on trial. And all of a sudden, what was a question or a suggestion or a thought, we now have to sit in a meeting and defend it. And it turns out it was just a thought, it was just a question, and now the attention's on us. Or we feel like we've upset you, or it feels to you like we're questioning your authority. And so that question, that word of caution, gets taken out of context sometimes, or that person that's giving it just doesn't feel like, I just don't feel like I can be quote unquote brutally honest, because when I am, I end up in the hot seat in front of everybody, or I end up having to, give you 10 points about why and justify my thought here. And an eight will say, just tell me, just tell me what it is. And I'm not thinking about it like that. I want to hear what you have to say, if you have to say something. But I may not have time to explain it. I may not be able to explain it. I may not even be thinking about it. I may just say no and move on. And then the type 6 is feeling dismissed. Or they'll say, well, I want to understand where you're coming from, so I'm going to ask you some questions. But potentially the tone, the intensity can sometimes feel like you're on trial on the receiving end. So these are some things that will come back in our conversations where we have this dynamic. And the leadership team will say things like, or the type 8 group, will say things like, listen, I don't always want to be in charge. I don't necessarily have to be in charge, but I have to feel like what is being done with confidence, and it's being done right. It's being done well. And if you're coming to me kind of hemming and hawing, and you're giving me 6 different options, and you're asking me, then I feel like, well, you know what? Never mind. I'll just do it. I'll just do it. And meanwhile, the 6s will respond with something like, well, I'm not sure what to do. I want to run a few things by you and get your thoughts on which way we should go, what the right decision is here. And so there's just so much of this kind of the way that we see the world through our own lens. And then with that, we're interpreting each other's communication and intentions. And one outcome recently that came up, and I really like this because I think this is something practically you can use if you have a similar dynamic, is the eight leader in this particular situation said, you know, I truly do not want to be in charge of everything. And so what might be helpful so that I don't feel like I have to do that, and it gives you the confidence to practice your decision making skills. It's like not everything is a level 10 decision. You know, what should we order for the team lunch isn't going to have a huge impact versus, you know, maybe some details around this new product launch that we have spent the last year building. Yeah, that I want you to maybe run some things by me. Still, it would be great if you gave me a recommendation and why, but you could also say, or, you know, this is an option because of this. But I want you to feel confident about what you're sharing with me. And they'll say, I need you to be confident when you're presenting these options, because you could be saying the same thing, but if you're like, well, this or that, the eights are saying, I don't feel good about that. I don't feel like you have it. And then that means I have to take it and so that I have it, but I don't necessarily want to have it. And so that is something that the eights can work on, maybe developing that confidence decision-making practice in their teams. And then as the six teammate, working on building that muscle, making decisions. And so what they said was there's going to be some situations where you just make the decision. It's a low level, you know, maybe 1, 2, 3 level, you know, situation. And so if you mess it up, it's not the end of the world. Right? The companies aren't going to have to close their doors. Nobody's, you know, job isn't going to be in jeopardy. Those types of low-level decisions, you don't have to bring to me. And I want you to start making some of those decisions. Now, if it is a level 8, 9, 10, it's going to impact the company. It could impact your job, my job, somebody else's job. Yeah, let's talk through that, but I still want you to bring that confidence. This is something that has come up often, and people are always wondering, I want to know more about the different type matchups, how they work together, that coworker compatibility. And this is one that I see so often. And in case this is in your organization or your department as well, hopefully some of this insight about kind of what's going on behind both of the types' frustration. Because what the sixes will say is, you're not making it safe. You're not making it okay. Like, it doesn't feel like I could make a decision and mess up, regardless of the level of consequence. And so, yeah, I'm a little nervous. Yeah, I'm going to overthink it a little. Yeah, I want to run it by you. And I may not be super confident because of how you've reacted in the past. So it's not on one type or one person in this relationship. It's just, hey, let's understand what's going on here. And then let's come up with a couple of things that we can each do better. And we'll just test that out. How is that going? How is that? Is that creating more confidence in both people? Is that moving us forward? Is that helping with frustration? No? Okay. What else could we try? Let's try something else. Let's practice something else. Let's come up with some other ideas. But at least we have an understanding of what is going on and where some of that frustration is coming from. And so I think that that's a good reminder for sixes when you're coming to your eights, whether it's your manager or a teammate, they want to feel that confidence. And so whatever you need to do to be able to project that confidence, work on that. And one of the growth opportunities for a six is around looking for the evidence, looking for all the evidence that you have done things well, that you have gotten it right, that you do make good decisions because they are thoughtful. You get the information, you talk to the people. And so remembering that, because you can forget and just look to the future and think all that could go wrong, but remember and to look back and remind yourself of all the times things did go right. Now, of course, it didn't go right all the time. You didn't nail it every single time, but I am guessing that our sixes have a bag full of evidence of things that they have done well, that they have a bag full of wins. So remembering that. And then the eight's work in this situation is going to be around creating that space, that safe place, that to encourage those teammates to be confident, to share. It's not enough just to say, well, my door is open, come in and share every time. We're going to have to, as eights or people with this type of energy, think about your reaction when somebody, quote unquote, gives it to you straight. Or shares their ideas. How do you react? And that is part of the space that you're creating for people to be able to want to come to you, and that development of that person. So what I'm going to do, because the other thing about this, and that makes the Enneagram so good, so rich, but also, especially in the beginning, can add to some typing confusion, is I'm talking very basic type 8, type 6 from a very basic definition, right? When you get down into it, though, we've talked about, if you've listened to this podcast before, we've talked about kind of the flavor of the type, and each type has 3 flavors. We call those instinctual biases, according to the Awareness to Action Enneagram, and that also can play a part into this dynamic, because we're not just looking at a straight 6 or a straight 8. There are multiple different flavors of each. There's 3 different flavors of each. And so that adds even kind of more insight we need to be collecting, awareness we need to be paying attention to. So I have some notes here, and I want to pull these up so I can get to you. And I want to go through these 3 types of 8s and 3 types of 6s, and then start to think, okay, what else might be kind of causing friction, and what else do I need to be leveraging with this person, tapping into, leaning on, asking recommendations, asking for their advice, because they're really great at this. And this is kind of where I'm at over here. So as a reminder, our instinctual biases are kind of the thing that we value the most. And then our strategy, or our type, is the way that we go about getting it. So for example, our type 8s, striving to feel powerful. If there's 3 instinctual biases, and we've done some episodes in the past on this, so if this is new to you, I will include some of those episodes in the show notes so you can listen to those, but I'm just gonna kind of jump in for the sake of time here and talk about the transmitting 8, the preserving 8, and the navigating 8. And so our type 8s are focused on asserting their strength, avoiding vulnerability. They're striving to feel powerful, but each instinctual bias, when mixed with that, is going to express itself a little bit differently. So if you are a preserving 8, you are looking to find that power, that control in the preserving things by having control over your resources, having control and power over your routines, your environment. So building that strength and security through control over the preserving resources items in your life. The behavior focus here is going to be, this person is probably going to be more practical, more grounded, maybe more focused on taking care of their inner circle. This is if you mess with my team, you mess with me. They can be incredibly protective and fiercely loyal. So sixes don't have the only title for being loyal. Eights, especially our preserving eights, fiercely loyal, but it can come with a little bit of control. And as I go through the rest of these, we'll talk more about this in future episodes, but this is, I think, the subtype that often gets most confused with the type 1. We have our preserving 8, or am I a 1, 8 or a 1? And typically it's this preserving 8 that might think, gosh, I could also be a 1. How this might show up is managing their environment, the people in their environment, with confidence, whether it's money, property, logistics, like they know what to do. They're confident with it. They might act like the patriarch or matriarch, the person in charge, protecting and providing. They feel like it's their duty. It's my duty to take care of the team, maybe my family in a personal situation. They can be a little gruff, but warm. They might think, you know what, I show care by handling things. And we had one of my favorite pieces of feedback. This was, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago now, but I remember it, is we went around and were sharing strengths that we saw in one another. And there was a type 8 at the table, and he was kind of making fun of himself with his gruffness and, a lot of these qualities that we've talked about. And when we had the opportunity for everybody to share, not everybody, but some people to share a meaningful piece of feedback that they got, this person shared and said, I was really surprised to hear, but, somebody had shared that they feel like whenever they have a problem, they can come to my office and they know that I'm going to take care of it for them. We may butt heads, but when it comes to it, if it is us against a client or a vendor or a situation, they know that I have their back, and they feel like I'm going to go in their office, I'm going to sit at that chair, I'm going to tell them what's going on, and I feel like I can trust them to take care of it or help me take care of it. And that meant a lot to him. And I really like that. And that's kind of that energy here. In the workplace, they're going to be incredibly loyal managers, leaders, very protective of their team, but they do expect others to pull their own weight. They may resist unnecessary changes. They value that reliability, that loyalty, and their growth opportunity here is going to be around letting others help, letting go of micromanaging, opening up a little bit. When we talk about sharing emotional vulnerability, we're not saying you got to cry in front of your team. You need to read your diary. It's just, are there moments? Are there specific people where it makes sense for you to infuse a little warmth in the conversation, maybe a little, hi, how are you? How was your weekend? How was your vacation? How you doing? Or relate to a failure that they might have had. So that is our preserving type 8s. They are powerfully preserving. Our navigating 8s are powerfully navigating. So here they are looking to use that power and control within a group hierarchy. They're looking to take care of their tribe, protect the group. Some behaviors here might be being very strategic, a little charismatic. This type's going to be a little bit more politically savvy with that navigating instinctual bias. They are often looking at and focused on who's in, who's out, what's fair, what's not, what's going on within the group dynamics, what's happening here. So this person's is a little bit more kind of relationally aware. You might see these people champion justice and fairness for the group or for the organization. They are known to be natural power brokers, where they're building alliances and protecting the marginalized. They can dominate conversations or groups, sometimes without even realizing it. And then at work, they can be incredibly inspiring leaders who fight for their team. And with that same energy, they could clash with other dominant personalities. So they have an opportunity for their growth to look at stepping back from playing the power games and finding opportunities to allow space for others to share their perspective and their thoughts. And one thing that we'll talk about in the groups, and this probably applies to all eight, is to speak last. Some types, like the type 9, we've talked about looking for opportunities to be the first one to speak, to share your opinion. For 8s, it's the opposite here. Is there an opportunity for you? When are there opportunities for you to let the team share first, and then you'll share at the end, so that not everybody is, agreeing with the first thing that you said, and then the whole conversation is a little skewed. All right. And then lastly, our last flavor of 8 are the transmitting 8s. And so they are powerfully transmitting. This type is focused on leaving a legacy. Here they are looking to use their power and in control in a very intense way to attract and impact others. They want to leave a dent in the universe, like Steve Jobs. Go big or go home kind of thing. These people tend to be charismatic as well, incredibly passionate. Often they have this larger than life personality, and they are focused on expressing that strength and energy outward, letting people know. Some typical behaviors that you might show up is just a really high impact presence. And at times, this can feel and be seen as incredibly magnetic and inspiring and motivating. And other times, that same high impact presence can feel intimidating or domineering. They are focused on influence and attention. And one of their subtypes descriptors is around the concept of seduction. And this doesn't necessarily mean romantic seduction. It's just kind of that magnetism that we were talking about. They can be confrontational and at times maybe even a little provocative. You'll see them in the workplace taking big risks. This go big or go home, right? They will challenge the status quo. Somebody might say, well, this is the way we've always done it. And they're going to push back on that. They may dominate the conversations or can be seen as too much. So their opportunities for growth are going to be similar to what we just talked about, is listening more and pushing less, recognizing how their intensity can affect others, and practice balance, restraint in certain situations. Now, we'll always have to be careful with all of these, because if we dial that back too much, you lose that spark, you lose the thing that makes this specific type great to be around, right? A wonderful leader, an impactful leader. And so it's just a matter of dialing it in. And a lot of times it might be the situation, and other times it might be, okay, this person in front of me, how, what what sort of dialing in or dialing back, dialing up does this person call for? So from what I just said, what we know about sixes, you can already kind of start to see how, some of this might be making them break out in hives. Some of this might be causing a lot of stress. And you can see why when they ask questions, maybe some of these types of eights, or just kind of the eight in general, might feel frustrated, might feel like it's slowing down progress already, right? We can already see that. Also, though, what I hear from eights or what I hear from sixes is that they can also find all three of these types of aids incredibly inspiring and motivating. And that confidence and boldness and decisiveness will spill over to them if they hang around them for very long. And so there's a lot of good that our eights can pass along to our sixes too. So when we're looking at our sixes, they're striving to feel safe and secure, and we're going to look at the same three flavors, the same three instinctual biases. But when we match it up with the six energy, what does that look like? How does that get expressed? So the first one is we are securely preserving. So we just kind of double down on this is probably your stereotypical six, much like the transmitting eight. The last eight that we talked about was probably your stereotypical eight. It's the one that you most likely read about whenever you see descriptions of eights. This probably going to be very similar here with our preserving sixes. The core driver is staying safe, doing so through preparation. Do I have enough resources? Staying safe within a routine, feeling safe with predictability, and putting themselves in as much certainty as possible and avoiding uncertainty as much as possible. They tend to be pretty practical, pretty loyal. I think any type can be loyal, but you'll see this type being very responsible, very much for the common good. The group tends to worry about safety and worst case scenario. What might go wrong? What might go wrong, and am I prepared? At work, you might see them doubting their own judgment, but they will be deeply committed to the team, to the leadership, to their teammates once they feel like they can trust these people. They tend to be prepared for all possible outcomes. They can seem a little overly cautious. Maybe it's like, all right, you're prepared. You don't need plan C, B, C, D, E, F. You got plan A and B. And then they tend to bond with others on the team through shared task or service to others. At work, you'll find them being very reliable, tend to follow the rules. They like to work behind the scenes. They prefer not to be in the spotlight, and they may resist change the most. I don't think any six necessarily loves six, but especially our preserving sixes may resist change unless they, or I should say, until they are convinced thoroughly, until they can trust that person or trust that this new plan is going to work. This is another one that I think people go back and forth between. Am I a six or am I a one? And oftentimes it's this preserving six that can also look like that one. Next is our navigating sixes. And here they're looking for safety and security through the group by that social belonging, shared norms. And so they will orient towards the group and look for people, groups that they can trust, that they have shared values. And once they feel that, hey, I can count on these people, they are going to be fiercely loyal as well. They want to maintain that loyalty, and they expect the same from others. At work, you might see them really attuned to the dynamics on a team. They're going to be suspicious of authority at times, especially if they don't know a lot about that leadership team. They don't understand what's behind some of the decisions. You might also see this person incredibly skeptical when a new manager or a new executive team member steps in. But once they build that trust, they are deeply invested and loyal to that person. They might question your motives. They might question the policies and potential disruptions. Why have things slowed down? Why do we have to do this new, HR policy? What's really behind this decision? What are they really? Is this self-serving? Is this manipulative? So they're going to question, and it can seem like this person is doing it to be difficult, but when we remember, hey, their core strategy here is striving to feel safe and secure, and so they are trying to understand the motives behind a decision, the motives behind that person, what's driving that person. Once I understand that person, whether I like it or not, whether I agree with it or not, is less important to me. What is important to me is that I know it. And so 8s and 6s have that in common, and that it may not be as easy for 6s, certain 6s anyway, to just give it to you straight. But what I hear is that they do appreciate that, because now I know where I stand. I feel safe in knowing the truth. What doesn't feel safe is when I feel like you're, gassing me up and telling me that this is great when it's not great. That erodes trust. That feels like, okay, well, now I can't trust anything that you say. So both of our 6s and our 8s, I hear often that they appreciate that honesty. Even if they don't agree with it, they respect it, and it builds trust. In the workplace, you'll see this navigating 6 being incredibly team oriented. They tend to be really good at troubleshooting and spotting risks, and they may kind of test the leadership, test that new manager, maybe test the new teammate a little bit, kind of push back on some things before they fully buy in. So their opportunity for growth is to develop independent thinking, very focused on the group. So there's an opportunity to kind of step away from that group. What do you think? What do you believe? And build confidence around that. And then there's some opportunities around balancing questions, because those are important, with trust. Are there opportunities? Are there situations? Are there people where maybe you don't have to ask as many questions? Maybe you don't understand it all, but because you trust that person, or because you trust this team, or because whatever, wherever that trust comes from, you want to know 5 more things. You got 10 more questions, but could you just go along? Could you just say yes and move along? And again, you don't do that every time, but there may be opportunities for the benefit of your relationship with a particular person, for the momentum of the team, to look for opportunities. Hey, I don't have to understand the ins and outs here. I can go along with it. And avoid over relying on group consensus, which kind of goes back to that develop independent thinking. Okay. And then our last type 6 is the transmitting 6. So they are looking for, securely transmitting. They are looking for safety through, this is kind of an interesting one, strength and assertion and visibility. Now, this is the type 6 where we might say, gosh, am I a 6 or am I an 8? I really feel this is the type of 6 that might feel like, hey, I'm an 8. And sometimes, people will say, how do 6 and 8s get confused? This is the flavor of a 6 that will often get confused as an 8. I might have said that wrong. The flavor of a 6 that often gets confused as an 8. So they're achieving that safety through strength, assertion, and visibility. You might see them a little more defiant. They're going to push back a little more aggressively. They might be more comfortable taking charge because, hey, I trust myself. I feel safe and secure in my own decisions and ability to lead. So I'm going to take the reins here. At work, you might see them really challenging others, going toe to toe with the people, with the systems that feel unsafe or that feel unjust. So we have some of that justice energy here that a lot of times you'll see with our eights. They can appear very bold, very confident. We talked about confrontational, yet it's not the striving to feel powerful that's driving them. It is the fear of not being safe and secure that is driving that behavior. So same behavior potentially on the outside, but what's driving it can be very different. And then they may be drawn to causes or ideologies to really rally behind that really gives them that push to keep moving things forward. They tend to look very courageous and protective in the workplace. They may speak up when others don't, and they can be incredibly inspiring and sometimes maybe even be a little intimidating themselves. So their opportunities for growth here is going to be to slow down, turn down that reactivity that can come up. Look for the inner calm, maybe a little looking to be a little bit more grounded before questioning, before that confrontation starts. Looking for ways to feel safe without needing to be on the offense. And that, I mean, that is deep. That's deep right there. That's probably a conversation with your therapist type of growth. But that is a great point just to start to reflect on and look for those, again, situations with particular people where you don't always have to be on the offense, the aggressor, to feel like, hey, I'm going to be okay. I'm safe. I'm okay. So you can see from those, there could be even some clashes, and there absolutely is friction among the types because of these different flavors. You can see how there might be some friction between the transmitting 6 that we just talked about here and the preserving 6 that we talked about first. You can see how there might be some friction between our navigating 8s and the transmitting 8s, for example. And the layer under that is your background, your culture, your gender, your socioeconomic status growing up and now. There's all kinds of other things that will also impact, right? Your beliefs and how your personality is expressed. We're only 2 layers in here that we're talking about. So there's still so much complexity. There's so much that we're not talking about, but for the sake of using the framework, using the language, and I think I'm going to have to sneeze, and I cannot find my pause button. Let's see if I can keep it down. Okay. I think in the last episode, I had to pause it. Probably paused it like 10 times because I kept coughing. So I don't know if it's allergies. I don't know what is going on, but I have been having some sore throat, sneezing, just some weird things. So anyway, so I wanted to get into that level of depth today because I think that this is such a common dynamic that comes up. I wanted us to be able to understand it a little bit more and to have some insight about ourselves and potentially the person that maybe we keep butting heads with. And hopefully this will give us a starting point for what to ask them, some conversations to have. Hey, I learned this today. I could kind of see this in you. Do you relate to this? Does this feel true for you? This is what felt true for me. This is what I'm working on. Here's something that I realized that might be helpful if you did. more of, less of, instead of, whatever that might be. And so even if the person doesn't know the Enneagram, hasn't listened to this podcast, regardless, 6 or 8 or whatever type you are, having some of this to kind of to kind of prompt those conversations can be really helpful. And like I said, it's such a common dynamic. We'll look at doing more of these matchups. There's a couple others that come to mind. But as a group, what the eights had talked about during a recent workshop is letting the sixes in on more information, on more why we're doing something when possible. And then the 6 understanding that, hey, as a leadership team, we're going to try to do that as much as we can, as often as we can, but we can't always do it. And so we need you to trust us in those situations. And we talked about that being a growth opportunity. We've hopefully built trust. We've showed you we care. We showed you that we want to do the right thing. We're always trying to do the right thing. We're going to take care of you. And at times we just may need a quick answer. We may need your help with something. We may need your buy-in with something. And to the extent that we can explain it, we will. But at times, we're not going to be able to. So that was something that came out of that conversation as well that might also be applicable in your own dynamic. So if you happen to have this type 8 leadership and 6 team 8 dynamic, heavy 6 team dynamic within your organization, department, team, anything in here really resonate or anything additional that you would offer, I would love to hear from, quote unquote, the real world. I can share my experiences. I can share what certain books say, but it's always just that much richer, that more helpful if we can pull other people's experiences and insights and examples from their situation and add to the conversation. So let me know. There is on our website, there's an easy way to message. It's enneagrammba.com/contact. And then, we spent a lot of time, the whole episode, talking about this dynamic, but these are the sort of conversations and insights that come up, especially when we have time to do our group breakouts, whether it's a half day, a full day, some extended programming. Obviously, the longer that we have together, the more these conversations, the deeper that they can go, the more insight we can pull from them, and then the more ways that we can talk about applying them to your specific team. So I'm going to invite you to check out those options over at enneagrammba.com. And with that, thank you so much for being here. Would love to hear any insight. If there is another dynamic that you would like to hear about sooner rather than later, you can also reach out, message us about that, and I'll try and get that on the calendar. enneagrammba.com/contact, and I'll see you in the next one.